Well, welcome everyone to this AMA all about machine learning. So I'll just pass it right on over to the star of the show, who's Alfredo, and he's gonna lead the chat.
Yeah, thank you so much, Jen, and thank you all for being here for this.
Alfredo, I can't hear you very well. I don't know if it's just me.
It's a little soft.
It is a little soft. How about now?
Oh yeah, much better.
Better?
Yeah.
All right, perfect. Okay, well, thank you so much all for joining. I'm very happy to be here doing this AMA session about artificial intelligence and machine learning. We'll cover some interesting things. I'm here, of course, to answer any questions you may have, and if possible, regarding artificial intelligence and machine learning. So let me get started by talking a little bit about myself. I am a cloud advocate working for Microsoft, and my primary two areas are Python and machine learning. And I have a background in doing a lot of software engineering with Python in the past 10 or 12 years. Then I've transitioned to do a little bit of machine learning as well, and have produced a lot of courses and content in the past 3 or 4 years regarding specifically Python and machine learning. I try to concentrate on the good best practices for doing effective Python development and machine learning. And yeah, I like very well automated systems that take care of themselves. And yeah, so I'm happy to be here. We have with us today Jen Looper, who is going to help us manage the questions as they come in. Please remember that the questions are going to come through the chat. We have also Vedant Bachel, which is a student ambassador, and I am not sure if we have Vavuk Kalra here, but also from Microsoft, Paulo Beramendi. So thank you so much again for being here. A couple of reminders: if you haven't yet registered for the Imagine Cup, please do so. There's I'm going to be pasting some links, useful links in the chat as well, so that you can follow up. Let me see, Imagine Cup, and I'll put this here in the chat just in case that you haven't registered yet. There's the Discord server as well, where a lot of the discussions are happening. If your questions are coming up and you feel the need to keep going the conversation, please join the Discord server. We're here to help you and keep the discussion going. It doesn't end with this 30-minute AMA session. If you don't have the Discord link, it's over here. I'm pasting it in the chat as well. Tomorrow we have the Azure Bootcamp workshops. So that is pretty nifty. We're going to have a lot of workshops and all about Azure. So make sure you are joining those, and remember to submit your Epic challenge as well. Okay, so let me talk a little bit about machine learning in general. Actually, MLOps is starting to be like a pretty hot topic, and in the past, there's been a lot of concentration on doing on trying to produce very accurate, very good models for machine learning. And one thing that happens is where you might have something that is very useful, that is very accurate, that is behaving just like you would expect. However, trying to get that model into production is a whole different story, right? And there's a lot of different components and a lot of different things that need to go in place, and sometimes it's tricky. And you start at a place where you have this model and you're tinkering with it and you're producing good results, and then the time comes to like, oh, okay, so we need to get these into production. What do? We need to like serve some request, kind of like let our customers, let our users interact with this model that we produced. And there's a lot of different things and a lot of different components that go into that make these very tricky. At the very high level, I think the things that you primarily need to concentrate on is automation. Automation should be like the foundation that kind of like gets everything to make your life and that of your users much easier. With good automation practices, then things can go much better. Imagine a place where you can just click a button and suddenly like all of your new data is coming in and your model is getting rebuilt and suddenly gets into production just with the click of a button. It's really spectacular when things are working that well, and we're seeing a well-designed, robust environment for producing models. Now, along with automation, then a few different pieces also come together. And one of them is once your model gets into production, usually you have a model that has been packaged. And when I first learned about packaging machine learning models, I was like, well, what kind of like cutting edge technology are we talking about? And well, it's packaging machine learning models is nothing else other than putting the model into a container and making sure that that container can interact well with the model. That's it. That's all it is. And if you're familiar with containers, you might be surprised that really that's all it is. If you're not familiar with containers, well, containerization is it's not that straightforward to explain in just a few minutes. But all that it is a virtualization technology that by defining some configuration files, you can create a composable, reproducible environment, virtual environment for a piece of software. In this case, the model is the central piece of information that you're going to interact with. And when you're packaging, well, you're going to have to define your own rules on how to interact with that model. Something that is very common is to put some HTTP API in front of the model. That way you can rely on HTTP, a simple HTTP request to ask questions for your model. You could say, well, I'm going to have /API and then ask some questions for my model, and then that gets into production, and then you receive some responses back. So pretty useful to package that, and with that also again. It comes with a lot of problems as well. Then you start thinking about, well, I have this model in production. It's already there serving some requests. But what happens if you have dependencies and requirements that are not quite working? So it's not that uncommon to create a Python project, for example, and put your model in there, and say if you're using scikit-learn to interact with your machine learning model and produce some answers, that, hey, what happens if you're using the wrong scikit-learn version for the Python version where the container is running? Well, you're not going to know that until if you don't have the monitoring and alerting systems in place, you are going to get into trouble, because that container is going to arrive into production, and suddenly your customers, your users, are going to say, well, this doesn't work. I'm not getting the answers that this model should be giving me. And it is very crucial to, along the way, kind of like identify these things that may happen, that may make your process more problematic. Nobody wants to be notified off hours about some machine learning model that no longer works. And I'll tell you a small story that I learned the other day. A big search engine with a large company behind it got into trouble once because they didn't realize that someone was publishing models from their own laptop. So they were using their laptop as the environment where they were producing these highly effective models for the search engine. And it turns out this person at some point said, well, I'm going to change jobs, I'm going to go somewhere else. And lo and behold, they had a problem with the model, and they found out the hard way that they couldn't get how to fix this problem because the models were produced in a laptop somewhere from an employee that is no longer available. So lessons are learned sometimes the hard way, and this doesn't need to happen to you. And Microsoft also has a few good resources for MLOps specifically, and learn. I don't know. I don't think there's a specific learn path. Microsoft has Microsoft Learn resources where you have like learning paths, which are like a set of good pieces of documentation that you can follow on your own and make some progress. There's not a specific one for MLOps, but if you search for MLOps in Microsoft Learn, so thank you for pasting that link, Vedant. If you search for MLOps, there's a lot of different things about MLOps that you can use. And again, MLOps, all that it is, I mean, I know it sounds like a buzzword, but all that it is a set of components, best practices that you can put into your environment of how you work from some data that then gets put into a model and then going all the way into production. So all in all, I think it's good to keep thinking about machine learning operations and how to make every process more robust. All right, so we've talked a little bit about the foundation of machine learning operations, which is automation. We've talked a little bit about monitoring when your model gets at the end. But what about reproducibility? It kind of like goes hand in hand with automation, but what that means is, and let's just reuse the example of the dependencies changing. Say, for example, your container has changed the dependencies, or you want to use the new flashy version of scikit-learn that just came out, and it's like, I want to use these features and I want to put it in the container, but somehow now there's two things that are kind of like inconsistent. Your dependencies or your code is changing, and perhaps your model is now becoming old, and so you need to retrain. How do you retrain a model? Well, what you need to start thinking about is kind of like setting up a process, setting up like a recipe. It's really thinking like like you're a chef and you're writing a recipe. Well, first I need to get my data. Oh, where my data is coming from? Well, my data is coming from an Azure blob storage blob that I have over here. Okay, how does that data get over there? So you get all the way to the beginning. Sometimes they call it shifting left. So you're gonna go all the way to the left, all the way to the beginning. I'm gonna get my data. Ooh, like, is the data changing? Is the data malformed? Like, does it need to be normalized? If you've ever dealt with dates or addresses, you know that there's a lot of potential for those to be all over the place. And so you need to normalize that. How do you normalize that in a way that you don't have to go into some computer, into some server, and type some things and check that things are all right? Well, you need to start automating that. But before automating, well, basically you need to go through the list of steps from the very beginning all the way to the very end, and then one by one start creating steps. And these steps, once they are chained together to form your process of how you're getting things into production, well, in machine learning and in MLOps, they call that a pipeline. You define the whole process, and I mean, it might not be one pipeline, it might be like several pipelines. So you're saying, well, data is over here, that's its own set of pipelines, and then when that's done, the process keeps going on, and we move into training and figuring out, like, you might be doing AutoML, which is a fantastic feature of Azure Machine Learning Studio that you can use. It's pretty good, and you can actually try with without any coding skills whatsoever. It's like it allows you to do no code stuff, which is pretty good. But what does what does pipelining or using pipelines or using this style of composing your environment, your reproducible environment, what are the benefits? Well, one of the benefits, which I think is really cool, is imagine you're starting all the way from scratch and trying to get all the way to production, and something happens, something like, yeah, your data came in fine, but somehow your cleanup scripts for your data fail to normalize a column. Like there's a new column for whatever reason, and you are like, I'm very surprised. Like I don't know what happened. So instead, sometimes instead of going all the way to the beginning, pipeline allows you to start where things right before things started failing. So you start fixing things right before they fail, instead of like restarting the process all the way from scratch. Imagine if you're working in a company that the whole process takes 3 hours. You don't want to wait 3 hours every time something fails. You want to start right where things are failing. So all in all, like I think these processes are made for you to have like a robust way of deploying models with lots of confidence. So, but this is an AMA, and I would encourage you to make all kinds of questions for me. Happy to answer anything that you might be curious about, anything about AI, machine learning, Azure Machine Learning Studio. I mentioned briefly the Auto ML feature from Azure ML Studio. I think it's great. Like if you log in, into Azure Machine Learning Studio, where you get the dashboard, there's an option there to do Auto ML. And it's super simple. Like you can upload your data set. If you're familiar with working with data sets, it could be like a CSV file somewhere. You don't even need to, the process of uploading your CSV file is not that complicated. You can even have it hosted somewhere else. There's a way that even you can say, hey, my CSV file is in GitHub. Can you pull that for me? And it pulls it in, and automatically Azure is just figuring out all of your fields, and it gives you like a nice UI, a nice representation of what's in that CSV file. And it analyzes everything. Actually, when I did it once, I had my data set, and I felt really proud about my data set. I put it in there, and it's like, oh my goodness, I have a column here full with empty values. Like I need to clean that up. And what happened was, well, first I felt embarrassed because I didn't know that I was producing a data set that was all horrible. But Azure Machine Learning Studio has a way where you can basically select checkboxes and say, no, yeah, this column, I want to drop it. Don't just even consider it, and it will do that for you. And as it's making changes, the other cool thing that you can do, but almost automatically, is that it captures versions of the changes that you're making to your data set. So you might say, oh, Jen might say, oh, Alfredo, like, why did you drop that column? Like, that was super business critical. Like, what were you thinking? It's like, oh my goodness, what am I gonna do? Like, do I need to pull again the CSV file again from scratch? Well, no. The only thing you need to do is just go back to the previous version. And so that's also pretty critical, because things may happen. Perhaps it was not me that's making the mistake. Maybe I'm writing some nifty Python script that is doing the cleanup for me, and somehow my Python script made a mistake or a wrong assumption, and then it's messing up. And I need to, hey, I want to use the previous version, or compare what was when this model was working well before. How did the data look? And so you can do all of those things. And so continuing with the AutoML story, which I think is really great, and that you go to the data set and you say, well, these are the columns, these are the things that are interesting about the columns, and then you can train and select, and AutoML does its thing. All right, we have a question. Let's see.
Pipelines.
Yes, pipelines. So Tigi Yombi, I hope I said your name correctly. Please, about pipelines, how concretely integrated in our daily code projects? Well, that's a fantastic question, because sometimes when we're faced with new patterns or new technologies and we hear these buzzwords, there's a lot of friction, right? You're faced with the problematic. Thank you for the good pronunciation, call. I was like, yeah, I'm happy that I made that well. When you're faced with new technology, new patterns, and someone says, well, you should do pipelines because pipelines are very good for you, and you're like, well, I mean, what do I do here? Well, I think you have to think about this big problem that you're having, which is like, well, I have this massive set of things that I need to do to put this model into production. And then you need to start piecing that problem apart and then find the smallest piece in that problem that you can automate. I mentioned one, which was dealing with the data. Data is crucial for having very good machine learning models. And so you can just think about data. Just think about how your data is getting acquired and identify like the simplest, most straightforward thing that you can do with data. It could be dropping columns that don't have any values, or changing empty cells to have a better, pandas has like a not a number thing that you could do. You could fill that out, or identify like the simplest, the thing that you say, well, this is cake. This is pretty useful and pretty easy for me to do. I just need to write one line of Python and I'll do it. And so instead of doing that manually, try to automate it and try to find a tool that will do it for you. So, and I'm not being super specific here because your use case might be different. So say, for example, you're using GitHub Actions, which allows you to do a lot of automation as well. So not technically a pipeline, but you could set up something in GitHub Actions that does that cleanup for you. In Azure Machine Learning Studio and some of the tools that live in Azure, you could go and actually build something that is an Azure pipeline. So that's now we're mixing a little bit of product naming or product branding with some of the features. But in essence, behind the scenes, they're all the same. You're just setting some steps about automation. And but you said, what are some concrete steps? What are the concrete things that I can do to integrate into these projects? So we talked about a few of these things. One of them is identifying the smallest piece that you can automate. Have automation very well defined. Like it's a critical thing to think about at every single step in your process. Identify like the simplest thing that you can do. And do that. Find a way to automate it. If it's in GitHub, use GitHub Actions. If it's in Azure, use Azure Pipelines. You have no idea how Azure Pipelines work? Well, there are tons of examples and learning paths that can help you get started. And in essence, again, it's just behind the scenes. Everything is all about automation. You're declaring some steps. You're saying, well, data comes from here. I'm going to change this thing. And this thing at the end finishes. So hopefully I managed to answer that correctly. I know I'm not being very, specific, but I can't. I think it's not useful when someone says like, well, you should use X, Y, and Z technology, and that's the way to do it because everything else is wrong. And I think it depends. Whatever is your environment, however you feel more comfortable. As long as you have a very good understanding of your project, I'm pretty sure you do because you're building it, you're working on it, then you'll probably be able to identify things that you can automate pretty easily.
And I think that we should think about in the Imagine Cup, I can't think of one project that got anywhere near the finals that didn't have some kind of machine learning integrated into it. So this is just almost expected. So I think that folks will, be looking for easy ways to do machine learning, and Azure offers a lot of options for you. So maybe we can, drop some links in and take a look at services like Custom Vision AI. There's, for image recognition, there's a lot of services you can use, and some of them are quite nice. Lobe AI, Custom Vision AI. And you can use smart bots. That's another option. So there's lots of great opportunities. So drop your ideas into the chat if you are willing to share, or join with us on Discord, and we will be happy to coach and chat. We're here for that.
Yeah, that's an excellent suggestion, Jen. Thank you so much. Yeah, so we're almost at the end. Again, just ask me any question. Happy to give you pointers. Happy to help you out. You would be, I think you would be surprised to know how automation. I know I've said automation like 100 times already today, but I think it's at the core of everything when we're talking about robust processes to get machine learning models into production and to think about yourself, really. Like if you think about a situation, now when it succeeds, now it's like, oh, it's great, my model is in production, everything's great, users are happy. Think about the problems. Think about, what is going to happen when I deploy this and I selected the wrong ports, the wrong HTTP ports to serve my model? What is going to happen to me? Well, what can I use to alert me that, yes, in fact, I made a mistake, I had a typo. It's not port 8080, it's port 8081. That has happened to me many times, and I think once it happens to you, and once you're like, oh yeah, I've had all of these mistakes in the past, how can I make my life easier? Oh, let's just start thinking about automation or alerting or monitoring. Azure has a lot of stuff for monitoring as well. And you have application insights that tells you like the universe of metrics for containers that are being deployed. And it, of course, can also help you build robust models and processes. All right. Well, again, I think I shared some links in the beginning, but the discussion doesn't end here. Remember, please, that we have the Discord server and all the channels. You can keep asking me questions there and keep the conversation going. If anything that I've told you today was interesting, or you had more questions, or you thought, oh my goodness, Alfredo, like I have no idea what you're talking about, can you explain more of these? Please do that. Happy to help out.